Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen. I'm an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos every week for a couple of different reasons. The first of which is to take my brain out of the mode of background work over the course of the week and move into the process of actually writing and preparing the sermon that I will preach to my congregation for the weekend. So that is the first reason I do these. And the second is just to allow you, the viewer, who have come across this video for whatever reason brought you here today, whether you are a regular viewer, for which I say thank you, or if you are a first-time viewer who have stumbled across this and are kind of wondering what you're getting into, just to allow you to gain some different insight into the assigned text for the week. So that is why I do these. This particular Sunday, November 17th, 2019, the 23rd Sunday after Pentecost, our gospel lesson comes out of Luke chapter 21, verses 5 through 19. Now, just a word for where we are at in the church year. I kind of mentioned this last week, if you happen to catch that video. And we are looking at the end of the season of Pentecost, the end of another church year. Perhaps you've heard me talk before that the church calendar does not quite line up with the regular calendar, and it's off by approximately a month, depending on the year, for when the previous church year comes to a close and the new one starts. With the close of the season of Pentecost, which will actually happen next week with Christ the King Sunday, or Reign of Christ Sunday, it's sometimes called. We'll bring that to a close, and then we'll move into the season of Advent starting on December 1st. And that kicks off the run up, the short season, about 4 weeks long, running up to Christmas and kicking off a new church year. So that's where we are. And now, as per usual, here towards the end of the season of Pentecost, where we are, we get into the apocalyptic type texts, specifically scripture passages that sort of give glimpses towards the end times. Is a normal routine here for the last few weeks. Now, we tiptoed into that a week ago with that, and it's definitely on display this week here. Now, depending on the individual year, sometimes we get a little bit more of those texts, just depending on the length of the season of Pentecost, which kicks back to Easter. And when Easter falls, Easter was kind of late this year, so the season of Pentecost is a little bit shorter than sometimes it is. And because of that, we're only getting a couple of weeks of these apocalyptic type texts, but this is certainly one of them. So with that being said, kind of that brief overview, let's get into this, or we'll read it and then we'll get into it. Luke 21, 5 through 19. When some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, Jesus said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another, all will be thrown down." They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be, and what will be the sign that this is about to take place?" And he said, "Beware that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and the time is near. Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and plagues. There will be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons. You will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance, for I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated because of my name, but not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your souls." All right, so that's the passage. This is a part of what we call, or some call, the little apocalypse. And it's part of a slightly larger teaching of Jesus. It goes on a little bit longer than where we end this, but it's present in all three of the synoptic gospels. So Matthew and Mark also have it, and they're pretty similar. Perhaps you've heard me say before that sometimes when we have overlap of stories among the different gospels, we get some pretty significant differences. These ones are pretty similar. Not word for word, of course, but the sensibility is pretty close to it. Now, what prompts it? The setting is important. So this happens during Jesus' final week of life. He's in Jerusalem in advance of the Passover festival, which is, of course, when he is eventually betrayed and crucified, and then the resurrection. That's all coming in the near future for the setting of where this is. He's constantly in and out of the city and into the temple and the Temple Mount, and then out across the Kidron Valley to Bethany, which is where he stayed. Matthew and Mark kind of actually give this setting that they have come walking out of the temple where they've been, and then they cross over and they're sitting on the Mount of Olives, and that's where this teaching happens. Luke kind of doesn't really give us that. They're talking about the temple, but directly preceding this is a period, or the very, very brief passage about the widow's mite, we call it, the widow that comes and puts her last 2 coins in, and Jesus kind of comments and teaches on that. But it seems that he's not doing a large scale teaching to a crowd in this. It really kind of appears that this one is aimed more intimately towards the disciples. So it's more of a small scale teaching, and yet very important. So what prompts this whole conversation is the disciples are marveling at the temple. Look at these large stones and amazing gifts that have been given. Now, there are excavations that are going down into the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. I have not seen them personally, though I have seen the entrance into it when I was there about a year and a half ago. But a colleague of mine has actually gone down in and seen these excavations and talked about the size of the stones. And they're incredibly huge. They're like 10 feet wide by 10 feet tall by like 20 feet long, individual stones. So the placement of those, I mean, is mind-boggling to think about trying to do that even with modern technologies, much less to try and think about doing it 1,000 plus years or 2,000 plus years ago when it was manual labor that was doing it. But so that's kind of important to think about, just the scope of the construction of the temple. Most of Jesus' disciples, not all, but most of them are small town people who probably the only time they ever see anything like this at all is when they go to Jerusalem for the festivals. But their regular towns or communities are small and very humble. And so that's something to consider, just the eye-opening, mind-boggling site of the temple that they're thinking about. But so the setting is important as we consider this. And as we consider Jesus' audience in roughly the year 30 or 32 or 33, somewhere in there, when the temple was still there. But keep in mind, it's the second temple. The original temple had been destroyed and then eventually rebuilt. If we think about the setting when Luke was written, which was around the year 100 ish, give or take 20, 30 years. But after the destruction of the temple, so then this would be heard by Luke's audience a little bit differently. And then as we think about it now, 2,000 years later, with all of this hindsight, there is no temple. Now the Temple Mount is there's a mosque. There's actually 2 mosques there, and they're enormous and they're gorgeous to look at, though I have not been inside them. But it's a completely different situation. So how is our setting important? And why is that important as Jesus is talking about this situation? Well, consider that the disciples are looking at this amazing temple and it's mind-blowing to them. And he says there's going to come a day when not one stone will be left on another. It'll all be destroyed. And now think about what's a place in your life, like a structure or a building or something that you just feel like is never going to go away. It's just always going to be there. Maybe it's a church. Maybe it's a school. Maybe it's a house. Maybe it's a landmark of some sort. And now imagine if someone tells you, well, there will come a day when that won't be here. And maybe that's kind of like, wow, that just doesn't compute. But that seems to be the case here. And it freaks them out. It's something they rely on. It's always going to be there, even though it's the second one. And so that's when they kind of flip out. And so they ask, what are the signs that this is going to happen? When will we know that this is about to happen? It's almost like they want to pull their calendar out and pinpoint the day so they can be prepared for it. And then Jesus kind of shifts into the sense of there's going to be worse things than just the destruction of the temple. Yeah, that's bad, but there's going to be way worse things than that. And you know what? Those bad things, those horrible things, that's not the end either. That's really the sense that I get from this. As he talks about there will be wars and insurrections, but do not be terrified. That word for terrified in the Greek is don't be startled. When these horrible things happen, don't be shocked by it. Bad stuff's going to happen, and it's still not the end. And I really kind of think that's the important aspect. This it goes on, and Jesus also talks about some of you are going to be arrested, some of you are going to be brought forward to testify, some of you are going to be killed. This is what lies ahead for you, because I'm going to be gone. That's a sense that even though Jesus doesn't really say it here, that's the sensibility. Something we'll also pick up in the Last Supper, that I'm going to be gone. How many times do I have to tell you I won't be here? You're going to be on your own. Well, sort of. You'll be empowered by the Spirit. That's all in here too. But that this is all coming. And so don't be surprised by it. And in the midst of it, don't lose faith. I think that's really the central key. It's like, yeah, this is bad. It's not the end. Those things are going to be terrible. It's not the end. I often have conversations with people who say they think we're in Revelation now. They think we're in the end times now. And I don't think so. I really don't. Are things bad? Yeah, there's bad stuff out there. We had news yesterday of another school shooting in California, Santa Clarita, where two or three, I think it's two students died. And that's shocking again, and upset me greatly last night because I've got a sophomore in high school, and it could have been my kid. It wasn't. Thankfully, I could give my kid a hug last night, but there's a couple of families who can't anymore, and that's horrible. And when I think about that, when I think about tragedies that fall on communities or on families or individuals, the world keeps going around them, even when the world is ending for this individual or for this small group of people. The world goes on, and I think that's what Jesus is reminding us of. It's even when your world is ending, remain faithful. Even when it hurts, even when it's painful, even when the gospel sounds or tastes like dust in our mouths, it still applies. And that gospel says that in the midst of all of this, you are not alone and you are claimed by God. And the claim of God upon your life is bigger than any of this stuff. That really seems to be the sense. Now, one last statement that I want to make. There's kind of a oddball ending to this passage when Jesus says, by your endurance, you will gain your souls. My Lutheran theology says, whoa, works righteousness. And that makes me throw the brakes on. I don't think Jesus is saying that only if you endure all this shit will you then be saved. I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. I really don't. I think it's endure it. Let your faith endure through the midst of it. And don't claim you've got all the answers. Don't be all happy joy. Oh, everything's fine because I've got Jesus. It's cling to your faith, cling to the promises of God, even when stuff is going badly. That's kind of what I make of that. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going with this sermon as I'm getting ready to do it. I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm going to actually write one. A few weeks ago, I actually did an off-the-cuff sermon, preaching extemporaneously. Now, yes, I had done prep work, but I didn't write a sermon. And I actually quoted this or referenced this passage where it says, don't prepare in advance what will happen because I will give you the words. So now I almost feel like I need to do that again. But we'll see. I may write one, I may not. But if you have thoughts, questions, comments, you want to throw those down in the comment section. We'll continue this conversation that way. Otherwise, if you appreciate these videos and think that they are a benefit and would like to support the ministry that allows me to do them, I will throw my congregation's link down in the website, and you can follow that and support us financially. No pressure to do that if you don't want to, but if you do feel that would be a benefit, it would be greatly appreciated. Have a great week, everybody. We will catch you next time.